What does OpenAI's new partnership with Reddit mean? Will Google's new AI announcements place them ahead of everyone else? And how will Microsoft respond this week? We're going to be going over those things today and more on Everyday AI. What's going on, y'all? My name is Jordan Wilson, and I'm the host of Everyday AI, and this thing is for you. It's for me. It's for all of us, but it's to help everyday people learn and leverage generative AI to grow your career, grow your company as well. So, if that's you, welcome. If it's your first time, maybe listening on the podcast, thanks for tuning in. Make sure to check out your show notes as always for more information. And if you're joining us live, appreciate you doing this as well. So every Monday, even when I'm on the road like today, we try to bring you the AI news that matters because there's a lot, right? Like you could literally spend hours every single day trying to understand what's going on in the world of AI and how it impacts your career. Or every Monday, you can just join us for our segment of AI news that matters. So if you're tuning in live, like Dutch here, or Brian, or Victor, or Tara joining us from Nashville, thank you. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Sometimes we, feature our favorite comments here from the live stream in our newsletter. So would love to hear from you as well. So as a reminder, if you haven't already, go to youreverydayai.com and sign up for that free daily newsletter. All right. Because, yeah, we're going to be recapping the AI news that matters and a lot more. So let's jump right into it and go over the AI news that matters for the week of May 20th. All right, let's start at the top. Pretty big deal here, y'all. So Reddit and OpenAI have struck a deal on data for model training. So Reddit has struck a partnership with OpenAI to incorporate Reddit posts into ChatGPT and other AI tools, granting OpenAI real-time access to Reddit content. So this follows Reddit's decision to charge for access to its data API, sparking some controversy and pushback from users and third-party apps. The partnership raises concerns about the use of user-generated content for AI training and the potential impact on content quality. There's obviously a lot of concerns that have been raised about the use of user-generated content for AI training and the potential impact on content quality on Reddit. And a lot of publishers, such as the Associated Press and Financial Times, have also struck some pretty lucrative deals with OpenAI to allow OpenAI to use its content for training and to allow its content to be used in ChatGPT. So Reddit also reached a similar partnership with Google in February, which allowed Google to train its AI models on Reddit data. And that deal between Google and Reddit was reportedly worth $60 million per year. There's no report right now how much this new OpenAI and Reddit partnership is worth yet, but it is important to note the timing of all of this. So Reddit just went public about 2 months ago, right around the same time as that Google partnership was announced. And after this new partnership with OpenAI was revealed, their stock shot up 10% instantly on this OpenAI news. So it's this is actually a very deep topic, one that I could probably talk about for hours, right? So I'm a former journalist, and there's been a lot of high profile journalism outlets and news corporations suing OpenAI and other large language model makers for using its data to train its models, right? So without going onto a short tangent, here's essentially how large language models work, right? And I'm oversimplifying, but they are essentially built on the open internet and the closed internet, right? So yeah, large language models have a lot of copyrighted information that ends up in its models, right? And if there's one thing that for all the great things and the bright futures that these large companies are helping us paint, they don't really share a lot of information on how their models are trained. Right. And again, I'm oversimplifying here, but essentially they have web scrapers and they ingest the entire open internet that they can get to, as well as there's these very large data sets, such as Google's C4 data set, right? And that essentially scrapes the 15 million most popular websites on the internet. But a lot of those websites are websites that probably aren't the best, right? So, such as there's websites out there that kind of collect all of this copyrighted material, that are essentially kind of like piracy websites, right? So you have to think at what is at the base of these models, right? And I've been saying this now for a year, and I've really leaned into this heavily over the last 6 months here on the Everyday AI show that, 2024 is going to be the year of a lot of lawsuits, right? So, um, a lot of people say that these companies, such as OpenAI or Anthropic, and even to a certain extent, Google and Microsoft are, kind of really, just exploding in terms of, you know, OpenAI and Anthropic, going from, small quote unquote startups to now companies that are bringing in, reportedly hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And then you have companies like Microsoft and Google, right, that are seeing all time high valuations, Meta as well. And a lot of this, a lot of people are saying it's because of these large language models and this generative AI movement. But it goes back to the data, right? Where's the data coming from? Who owns the data, right? And we're going to be seeing a lot of lawsuits. And I've said for a long time, the New York Times versus OpenAI and Microsoft lawsuit is going to be one of the first big dominoes to fall. However, in the interim, what we've seen is partnerships like this, like with Reddit and the Associated Press and the Financial Times. A lot of times we're seeing partnerships that are worth tens of millions of dollars each and every year or more, right? When we saw that $60 million kind of Reddit Google partnership, I said Google just got the steal of the year in terms of data, right? And if you aren't super familiar with Reddit, I mean, it is a gold mine in terms of data, right? It is essentially the public internet, playing out in real time. But a lot of people, especially over the years, have started to just search on Reddit versus searching on Google because it's real humans helping real humans and answering, it's real smart humans answering other smart humans questions, right? And providing context and relevant data. So that data right there, even just within Reddit is just largely valuable, right? So this is going to be interesting as we see more and more of these partnerships announced, because there's really, if I'm being honest, there's really only two ways you can go. Either you're going to be partnering with in OpenAI or a Microsoft or a Google on a, probably 10, 50, 60, $100 million a year partnership. Or, maybe if you're a smaller outfit, you're going to be suing. Or if you're the New York Times, you're going to be suing. So there's really only two ways that this is going to go. And I think people don't really talk about this a lot, right? We all just kind of blindly benefit from these large language models, myself included, right? And we love them, and all of the capabilities that they can give to ourselves and to our business. But we don't get back to, okay, were they legally trained? Were they ethically trained, right? And a lot of companies don't share. They just say, hey, we crawl the open internet, and we have humans who kind of comb through all this data and they train the models. But ultimately there is a lot of copyrighted material in all of these large language models. So pretty big news here from OpenAI, presumably the most important player in the generative AI or large language model space, and Reddit, which is probably the holder of the most unique data on the internet, right? But this also goes to beg a bigger and different question, right? Let's say you are an avid Reddit user, and maybe you've put a lot of personal data out there. You've done so anonymously, right? You're not putting your full name on your Reddit profile, but you're probably maybe sharing a lot of either your own personal data or maybe your own personal knowledge and expertise. And now it's like, okay, that's kind of for sale, quote unquote, or it's already been sold, right? So this does beg a bigger and bolder question that we'll definitely be tackling in the coming weeks and months here on Everyday AI. Yeah, and I'd love to hear from our audience. What do you think of this open AI and Reddit partnership, and just in general, right? I'm curious. Do you feel like I do? And maybe I'm a little bit on the extreme side, but I don't see any other way, right? I either see large lawsuits, right? Because let's say you're a medium-sized publisher, right? You might not be one of these first outfits to get a 10 or a $60 million partnership. So, I mean, what's your other alternative if you feel pretty confident that these large language model makers have used your copyrighted content, right? Now, yeah, you can put kind of blockers up there that block your website in the ongoing content that you're creating. You can block it from these different large language models, and you can block kind of those agents that go on your website and scrape. But then at the same time, even in the case of Google, right, you want your content to show up on Google. That's presumably how you make money, right? But then is it going to end up in Google Gemini and all these other, you could say the same thing with, you want to show up on Bing, Microsoft search, but then, okay, is it going to show up in Copilot? So, we are in this tricky, right? This tricky day and age of like, okay, putting out good content that helps people, that's valuable, that serves your customers and your readers. But, at what point is it your data and your data alone, or your content and your content alone versus, now it's going out to all these large language models? And especially as we talk about a lot here on the show, as the lines between traditional internet search and content consumption and AI, as those lines blur, I think there's a lot of big issues to tackle there. Yeah, love what Woozy said here. He said, helping, in quotes, and smart humans might be a stretch on some of those Reddit threads. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of, nonsense there on the internet and Reddit included. But yeah, there's obviously a lot of very great, helpful information out there on these publications as well. All right, our next piece of AI news. Yeah, Google's I/O conference. Kind of a big deal. So let's talk about what they announced on Tuesday, and because it was literally like AI everywhere. But before we even go through kind of the bullet points of what was announced and why it matters, I mean, we have to talk about the timing. So Google's I/O developer conference was May 13th. All right, so 6 days ago. But Google announced that date 2 months prior, right? It wasn't a last second thing. They'd been planning this event for 2 months. They had that date out there for 2 months. And then about 2 days prior to that announcement, OpenAI announced a surprise event, right? Which happened the day before. It happened last Monday, about an hour after we wrapped up our live stream, and they called their OpenAI called their event just Spring Event. Okay, so in that event, OpenAI announced not only its new GPT-4o model, which was available immediately to paid users, but also a new feature that kind of competed directly with Google's big feature that they were coming out with. So OpenAI didn't really name their feature, but essentially it's this ability or capability to kind of see uh, for the AI, the model, so GPT-4o in the iOS app, to kind of see things live, right? And we've talked about those demos, and we showed those demos here on the show before. But essentially, you could hold your phone up and work on a math problem live and ask ChatGPT, like, "Hey, what do you see? What's going on here? Help me with this," right? So it can see. It can interact. It can talk to you with very low latency, right? Human times. So uh, it's interesting because that was kind of Google's big piece here. So we're showing here on the screen about Project Astra. So about how a lot of people are saying that this is the future of AI. So it's kind of the timing when we talk about the news that matters. I mean, OpenAI just swooped in, kind of had this surprise announcement literally 24 hours on the clock before Google announced theirs. So Project Astra was this from Google. It's their kind of new multimodal AI assistant that's similar to the one that OpenAI demoed 24 hours before, that you can kind of interact with in real time. It can see the world, multimodality, answer questions, help with tasks, etc. So kind of in Google's demo, which we hope was live, right? Unlike their Gemini snafu that they in December, they infamously shared a heavily edited video showcasing Gemini's capabilities, which it did not have those capabilities. So unlike this one, this demo for Project Astra was presumably live, right? And they said it was, an unedited 1x speed demo, but it kind of showed someone walking around an office with kind of Project Astra on a Google smartphone and, asking questions about things in real time that were coming up on the camera. So you can think of it like this. Think of if you're, FaceTiming, right? If you ever have to FaceTime someone who's maybe, you need help with your computer, or, you're showing someone on your house and something's broken and you're saying, how do I fix this, right? Maybe you have an uncle who's a handyman and you're FaceTiming them and there's a leaky pipe and you're saying, how do I fix this, right? So that's kind of what these new kind of smart assistants are, right? It's in live. You can show them something and talk to them and converse, right, in real time. So that's kind of the big piece of Google's announcement at I/O last week. But before we get even too much more into that, I do want to kind of detail kind of some of the big pieces here, because there was a lot. Google, right, announced a slew. Like, they are literally sprinkling AI everywhere, right? Like the Salt Bay, just sprinkling salt on a steak. I mean, they're AI this, AI that. So let's talk about a little bit about what I think are some of the bigger and will ultimately be the more impactful AI announcements that came out of Google's I/O conference on Tuesday. So they did announce some enhancements to their Gemini models, including Gemini 1.5 Pro with a longer context window between 1 million tokens and 2 million tokens. They now also have an Ask Photos powered by Gemini, which was revealed for Google Photos, providing enhanced photo memory summaries. That one looked really cool, right? So essentially, if you use Google Photos, I do, you can essentially just ask the same thing, right? So they gave the example. I think it was someone's, daughter in her progress of swimming, and you can say, hey, how, show me everything, my of my daughter's swimming progress, right? And then this kind of Ask Photos kind of goes throughout the years of all the photos. It uses kind of AI and computer vision to say, okay, here's, this is your daughter. Maybe even if you have multiple daughters, you can ask about one. It uses kind of this facial recognition technology, kind of creepy, kind of cool. And it says, all right, here's everything that your daughter. Here's kind of a photo montage and kind of progress on how she's been swimming, right? So a lot of really cool use cases if you're okay handing off all of your data and all of your photos, to Google. I don't personally care. I do this, but Ask Photos does look like a pretty unique feature. And I'm wondering if, as we gear up for Apple's announcements at WWDC, I'm wondering if they'll have something like that as well. I don't think they will. So I think that's a pretty unique and a really strong feature that Google announced. Also, Google announced the rollout of their new Gemini Nano model with multimodality on their Pixel phones. Android 15, their new operating system, was presented with AI-powered search, Gemini as the new AI assistant, obviously, and on-device Edge AI for new experiences. Pretty huge piece there, right? Bringing kind of the power of large language models locally on devices. Pretty big. Also, another, maybe this is a straight competition piece with OpenAI, but Google showcased Gems, which are essentially customized versions of Gemini AI for specific tasks. So just how you have your GPTs with OpenAI, you can create a customized version of a model. You can put in your own data, your own files, your own kind of configuration instructions. Tap into API third-party APIs and bring in your own kind of specific capabilities. That's kind of what Google is going for here with Gems, which are just literally smaller customized versions of its Gemini model. So pretty much a one-to-one I don't know if we would say clone, but more or less cloning the capabilities that you have with GPTs in OpenAI. And then the fact that this is like 7th on my list here is pretty remarkable. But Google also demonstrated their new Google AI Teammate, which is a virtual teammate for work tasks. So you literally can give a virtual teammate kind of a space inside of your Google workspace, and it just performs actions, on your behalf. You give it access to the data that it needs to, but literally thinking it as like, okay, this person has a seat on my team. So kind of thinking with Google's new AI Teammate as a literal virtual teammate, not just this big, idea of, oh, you can do all these things with AI, but no, Like my AI has a seat on my team. It has access to all of these files. So pretty cool announcements there from Google. And I'm curious, for our live stream audience, and hey, if you're listening on the podcast as well, what's your reaction between what Google announced on Tuesday versus what OpenAI announced the day prior, right? Clearly, I mean, we're getting now actually back to back to back announcements from three of the biggest players in AI. But I'm curious what you thought. My thought is the Google announcement, they obviously, I mean, they're a much larger company, right? OpenAI, technically startup, one of the most powerful startups ever, but still technically a startup. And Google is, legacy tech company, one of the largest companies ever, right? So, we're kind of comparing apples and, banana pudding here, but still, the Google announcement, and I watched them both. The Google announcement seemed just too scripted for me. It seemed too polished, right? And I think, especially as we talk about generative AI, I think people like authenticity. I think they like, that's kind of why I go live here every day. I don't edit things. I sometimes, mess up or stutter or say something, I didn't mean to say. It's like I keep it in there, right? Because I think if we're talking about artificial intelligence, it should be real. It should be live, right? It should be, raw. And I think that's what we saw from OpenAI. Whereas, Google's announcement seemed eh, robotic, right? It seemed very robotic. It seemed overly scripted. That's just me. Obviously, from a product standpoint, super impressed with what Google rolled out. I haven't personally been impressed with Google Gemini as a model, right? But as you start to see all of these other features and capabilities that Google rolls out tied to its model, right? I mean, you have to start paying attention. So, I'm curious if you're paying attention to Google maybe a little bit more now than you were last week before this big announcement. Uh, yeah. Hey, Brian here's, kind of on top of the breaking news. This didn't make it into our AI news that matters, but he's asking, about if anyone saw that OpenAI is pausing the use of Sky Voice. So yeah, we'll be talking about that in our newsletter. But they did say, yeah, that was a little too close. They said to Scarlett Johansson, so they paused the use of that one. All right. Speaking of these big companies, right? So we've talked now about, kind of OpenAI's announcements with their GPT 4.0 that came out right before Google's, and then all of Google's I/O announcements, and some of them competing directly with OpenAI. And then here we go, Microsoft sitting over here in the corner being like, hey guys, you can't forget about us. When it comes to legacy technology, like Microsoft is there. All right. So Microsoft is its Microsoft Build Developer Conference is set to kick off now, kind of unofficially here in a couple of hours. So the official Build Conference, though, from Microsoft kicks off tomorrow. So that's Tuesday, May 21st. However, in a couple of hours here, Microsoft is slated to announce a few new products today ahead of its keynote tomorrow with CEO Satya Nadella. So Microsoft is holding an AI event today to showcase their AI vision and upcoming Surface hardware and Windows software changes, all based around AI. So the event today will kind of set the stage for what Microsoft is calling the year of the AI PC, and will also include updates on Microsoft AI initiatives such as Copilot, right? Powered by GPT and Microsoft's reported $10 to $13 billion investment in OpenAI for reportedly 49% equity. So let's talk a little bit more about Microsoft Build and what we might be expecting this week, right? Huge week in tech. My gosh, y'all, like having from the three biggest companies having their yearly announcements, more or less. Pretty big news here. So Microsoft obviously will be discussing their AI vision and upcoming changes. So starting today, the event. So Microsoft, the Build Conference will also be taking place right after the event. Like I said, where further updates on AI and Copilot will be shared. The conference is also obviously going to be heavily discussing AI PCs, right? Kind of this new term, but Microsoft is saying, hey, we are AI, we are an AI PC company, right? Baking in AI into the hardware, and they'll have a neural processing unit to handle AI tasks and are expected. So the new AI PCs are expected to arrive with Intel, Qualcomm, and AMD chips. Also, so many sessions, right? So the conference is going to feature, keynote speeches, product announcements, and over 480 sessions, with 251 offered online and 175 recorded for later viewing. So yeah, if you want to check out that free conference, yeah, you can view it for free. You can obviously attend it. The event is in Seattle, and the event does run for 3 days, technically starting on Tuesday. But if you do want access, if you want to check out some of those sessions that are live and free and available to anyone, make sure you check out the newsletter, and we'll be dropping a link there to that registration page. Whew, a lot going on, y'all. I gotta take a sip of water. So much big news, in the past 7 days from OpenAI, from Microsoft, from Google. So let's talk a little bit. Speaking of big companies, there's one that we haven't technically really talked about yet, and that's Apple. So OpenAI and Apple reportedly have a date. So we did talk about this last week on our AI News That Matters, that, hey, Apple, it looks like, is choosing OpenAI over Google to bring generative AI capabilities to its next iPhone and iOS updates. So, according to Bloomberg reports, Apple and OpenAI are preparing for a major partnership announcement at Apple's WWDC. So, OpenAI is working to ensure that their platform can handle this influx of new users. Yeah, we'll see about that, from iPhone. And iOS 18 is expected to feature AI-driven messages and Safari summarization capabilities. Hey, I can't wait for that. I'm so bad at this, y'all. I don't know if it's just me. At the end of the day, like, I kind of look at my text messages and I have, sometimes 50 unread, sometimes 250, right? I'm in a lot of group chats. But, I actually can't wait for the AI summarization where I can just ask, Siri, and hopefully Siri will be a little smarter if it is maybe powered by OpenAI, to say, hey, catch me up on all of these text messages, right? Or if that comes to email, on the iOS device, but then also for Safari as well, right? That'll be a huge time saver. Obviously, something that we've had capabilities to do on the desktop for multiple years, and if you have Google or Android phones, you've had capabilities to that as well. So personally, I have an iPhone, so I'm looking forward to kind of some of these generative AI features coming reportedly to the iOS 18 and Apple's next iPhone as well. But we do now know that there is an announcement planned for June 10th to kind of talk more about this OpenAI and Apple kind of partnership. So again, like we talked about this last week, we said, hey, it does look like, at least according to Bloomberg reports, that Apple has decided on OpenAI, right? There was literally reports going on back and forth, so much flip-flopping over the last 3 months on, oh, Apple is going to develop their own model. And, we saw them release a couple research papers, and then they said, no, they're going to OpenAI. And then there's a new report that said, no, they're definitely going Google. But, we really, at least in the last week, we haven't seen any conflicting or contradictory reports, but it does look like not only is OpenAI and Apple going to be partnering here in the future, but we will see an official announcement from the groups on June 10th, kind of right there at the front end of Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference there in June. So pretty big news. All right. Speaking of pretty big news, our last piece of AI news that matters. Well, there's some more drama at OpenAI. You can't get through more than a week without some drama, but this time it comes to their former head of alignment. So we did, yes, talk about this on the show last week, as former OpenAI head of alignment and super alignment teams, Jan Leakey, resigned last week from OpenAI. So we did talk about that, but he kind of put out some more information, I guess, or kind of a statement, so to speak, on Twitter. So we're going to be breaking that down here. But, if you don't know what super alignment is, but in short, Jan Leakey led the team that ensured future AI and artificial general intelligence, so AGI, models were safe for society. So a pretty important role there at OpenAI or any company. So if the head of the kind of department that ensures that these models are safe for the public kind of resigns suddenly, it's pretty big news, right? And there's obviously a lot of speculation, not really going to talk about that a lot, but you can imagine, right? If the head of making sure that AI models are safe at one of the biggest players in AI in the world suddenly resigns, yeah, you might have to raise an eyebrow and be like, "Oh, what's going on there? Are there bad things happening? Are new future models safe?" Right? And this did kind of align with GPT 4.0. I don't think that it's related to GPT 4.0, the new model from OpenAI, but you do have to assume that there is going to be another much more capable model coming very shortly from OpenAI. Was kind of Jan's kind of announcement related to that? I'm not sure, but let's just kind of read over some of the things that he said in his announcement. So, kind of quoting him here. So, he said, "Over the past few months, my team has been sailing against the wind. Sometimes we were struggling for compute, and it was getting harder and harder to get this critical research done." Jan also said, "Building smarter than human machines is an inherently dangerous endeavor. OpenAI is shouldering an enormous responsibility on behalf of all humanity." And then he said, "But over the past few years, safety and culture and processes have taken a backseat to shiny products." So just huge. I mean, just some huge 1-2 punch there. So essentially saying, hey, we weren't able to get kind of the compute power that we needed to make sure all of these models were safe. But then also coming out and just saying plain as day, hey, it was all these, kind of, he said that the company is more concerned about all these shiny features and they're not cared about the model's safety. So pretty eye-opening, whether you follow, AI safety and ethical AI or not. Pretty big, pretty noteworthy here. And OpenAI's CEO Sam Altman kind of said in response, kind of said he's super appreciative of Jan's contributions, but then he said, he's right. We have a lot more to do. We are committed to doing it. I'll have a longer post in the next couple of days. So, yeah, pretty eye opening, right? When the former head of alignment and you can't just look at, whether your company's using ChatGPT or OpenAI or not. The reason why this is super important is because there are thousands. I don't know if OpenAI gives a number, but I would venture to guess that there's tens of thousands of companies that use OpenAI's technology in their products, right? So there's a good chance, let's just say you have a handful of, vendors that you work with at your company and, different capabilities. Maybe it's a CRM, maybe it's a ERM, I don't know. But just think there's probably so many of them that use kind of an API connection to OpenAI. So you're probably using a lot more of this GPT technology from OpenAI than you may realize. So it's not like, oh, okay, well, if models aren't safe, then I just won't log on to ChatGPT or my company will switch over. It's not like that, right? Presumably there are tens of thousands of other enterprise pieces of software, products, services, etc., that tap into OpenAI. So, pretty concerning here when you have a pretty sudden resignation, but not only a sudden resignation, but generally when OpenAI employees leave, and we mentioned this in the newsletter last week, there's some pretty strict rules around that, and there's some reporting, and Sam Altman came out on Twitter as well and said like, oh, this is my mistake, and it's embarrassing that we had all of these kind of stipulations, that OpenAI, former OpenAI employees couldn't, say certain things after they left. So, generally, if a high-ranking person from OpenAI leaves, you don't really hear anything. It is radio silence. So, it's actually pretty telling here. And I would assume pretty brave and bold move here as well from Jan Leakey coming out and saying like, hey, this is an inherently dangerous, right? He literally said, building smarter than human machines is an inherently dangerous endeavor. So, essentially saying this is dangerous. Like this is dangerous work that we're working on. We don't have the compute power to make this all happen. But then also saying like, hey, our work and this important work that we're doing was taking a back seat to safety as well. So we're going to have a lot more from that breakdown in the newsletter. Yeah, agree with Michael here, joining us from YouTube, saying, "Yeah, so much going on today." So yeah, hey, as a quick recap, here is the AI news that matters for this week. So yeah, we talked about Reddit and OpenAI have struck a deal on data for model training. No specifics yet on the amount, but presumably tens of millions or $100 million. Google's I/O conference was last week, and they just announced AI literally everywhere. Probably the biggest piece was their Project Astra. Then Microsoft unofficially kicks off their Microsoft Build Developer Conference today, but the official conference runs from starting Tuesday for 3 days in Seattle. And we're expecting to see kind of what's next with AI at Microsoft. Then OpenAI and Apple now reportedly have a date on the calendar to announce officially on June 10th their partnership. And then last but not least, some little bit of drama at OpenAI as its former head of alignment speaks out about some of his safety concerns. All right. That's not it. That's just the recap. So if you haven't already, make sure to go to youreverydayai.com, sign up for that free daily newsletter. And hey, if this was helpful, let me know about it. If you could, we spend, hours every single day, going through what matters in the AI news to keep you up to date so you can grow your company, grow your career. So if this was helpful, we'd appreciate if you could, if you're listening on the podcast or, share it with your friends. If you're listening here on the live stream, we appreciate your support. Click that little repost button if you're here on LinkedIn. We appreciate that. And I'd appreciate it if you join us tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.